I have the pleasure of sitting down with two people that need no introduction, but I will introduce them anyway. So we have Jeremy Hull here, who is our Chief Solutions Officer, and we have Adam Edwards. Yeah, give a moment for some applause. Who is our Chief Product Officer. And I think many of you are wondering who I am, as I have not had a chance to introduce myself formally like this to the entire North America team. I am Brainlabs CMO. So I have the privilege of essentially surfacing all of the wonderful work that you guys are doing externally and celebrating it out in the world. Today, we are going to talk about AI. Surprise, right? We just heard a lot about AI. Dan's done a great job teeing us up in terms of the opportunity that we have in the market with AI. But a lot of folks in the room are likely wondering, there's a bunch of applications of AI for personal use cases. We're all using them, but how has that really evolved for the brands and the products and services that we will all work on? So my first question for Jeremy is, how have you seen AI really reshaping the way that folks that we're servicing, like products and services that we work with, reshaping the way that their searches are being conducted?
I think Dan is spot on when he talks about how massive this AI shift is. And it's massive for a few reasons. If you think back to the origins of the internet and how Google became Google, it's because when the internet first got going, people really didn't know how to think about navigating the internet. They would say, I remember, you used to always say on the commercial, and go to www dot, and then, because you had to say that. The original sites that tried to solve for that were directories. And they imitated what was offline. They imitated the phone book with a curated list of things. And as a user, you kind of had that experience. You went on, you scrolled through, and you found a list of things you might be interested in. Google saw a way to do things differently and change the front door to the internet, the front door to information, by creating a search engine that lets people, why don't you tell me what you want to know, rather than scroll around. AI engagement points are another inflection point, where instead of just, let me enter a search, let me hope you understand my context, and then you give me a list of possibilities and I try and find the right one. Instead, it's inviting people, let me just tell me what you want and I'll tell you the answer, and then you can figure out where to go from there. I think that, I'll go back to ChatGPT. Why was ChatGPT successful when Google was so established? It wasn't because they were building anything Google didn't have. Google, with their TensorFlow solution, they already had all of the things to power an LLM. What Google didn't do, they didn't put it out there for people to use. Dan was talking about building tech, learning from it, getting it out there, figuring out what works, what doesn't. That's what ChatGPT did. They took something that honestly probably wasn't as good as Google's type of chatbot and just pointed it out toward the world and said, hey, everyone, try this out. It's kind of cool. And people tried it out, and they felt that magic.
The friction was removed.
Yeah, they felt that experience.
Yeah, awesome. Adam, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things for me is how significantly it's changed search behavior, right? It's not just an evolution of a search engine, it's something completely different. If everyone here thinks about how they use ChatGPT, Gemini, you're entering fundamentally different queries in different ways. And so there's a stat we love to highlight when we're talking about this with clients around the biggest chunk of increase in search volume is from 6+ word queries, right? You're entering full sentences with all of that context that Dan was talking about. And so that leads to a fundamentally more informational query as well. I think the other piece that's flipped on its head is we as search marketers, whether it was organic or paid, no matter what funnel argument you were having about the marketing funnel, the only consensus was like search is somewhere on the bottom. And I think that's been flipped on its head a lot as well, in that there are these, again, very upper funnel and informational queries that are happening on ChatGPT, on Gemini, and you need to think about those queries in a different way. And I think that's reflected in, I know we're going to talk a little bit about measurement later, reflected in people aren't necessarily clicking on anything. These are zero-click searches, but it doesn't mean that they're not deriving a ton of value, or from a marketing standpoint, that they're not being tremendously influenced by what they hear back.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with that discovery piece that you mentioned, super, super important. And brands are very concerned on how do they become part of that discovery journey. So can you talk to me a little bit about how do we rank on LLMs? How does a brand go about that journey?
Yeah, this is absolutely one of the most, not one of the most, I'll remove even the slight qualifier. This is what we're getting asked about by clients more than any other topic right now. And so I think there's a number of different ways that you get noticed. I would be remiss if I didn't start by saying traditional SEO is still arguably the most important aspect of being discovered on LLMs. That's not only because if there was a department-wide Royal Rumble later tonight, I do think we have more SEO folks than any other department here, but that doesn't hurt either to pander to the crowd there. Traditional SEO is really important. I think the organization of information is really important. I think this is intuitive. We've all heard garbage in is garbage out with any sort of AI tool. And so a lot of the best practices on structuring content, it's kind of like best practices for writing a good email or PowerPoint slide. Like, you want it in bulleted form. You want the most important information up top. You want to be able to derive the takeaways really quickly. So I think that's all the stuff that relates to traditional SEO. Then, and Dan talked about this a little bit, there's this whole other world of multimodal content that actively influences the LLMs. And I think we see it when you see what sort of content is cited. That could be third-party sites, that could be news sites, that could be listicles. A lot of times that's Reddit, although that's diminished in importance a little bit more recently. That could be organic YouTube. And the other thing is each of these platforms, each of these LLMs, is weighting different sources differently. Each individual person and search is going to have different sources weighted differently. And so it's really important to be present there. I think one of the nice things, talk about the Google search algorithm being, or ranking algorithm being such a black box, so are the LLM algorithms. However, they do show their work in the form of citations. And so I think one of the most important things that a brand can do to start influencing their visibility is you get to be a detective, right? I don't know, makes my job seem a lot more exciting when I describe it to my 5-year-old, but I tell her I'm a digital detective, and you kind of are reverse engineering what you see. If you see a competitor getting cited on Reddit versus a listicle versus their own site, those are 3 completely different pathways in terms of what action you need to take yourself to rank on that query or that prompt.
Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting, and it's the element that there's this real-time refresh that's required because all of these things are moving so quickly. So what would be your advice in terms of, brands are asking about this, like how often do we have to refresh our content? How often do we have to publish content? We all know in the room it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that part.
Yeah, speed of refresh is hugely important. And I think also, to tie into some of the questions Dan was getting on threat versus opportunity, it's on the organic side. If you're a startup, if you have bad SEO, it takes 6 months optimistically to turn that around. One of the nice things, one of the opportunities for any of our clients, big or small, is you can adjust your ranking pretty quickly. To your actual question of how often should they be refreshing, I think every 3 months on relevant topics where there is, if you're referencing statistics, if it's Capital One talking about Fed rates, yeah, that's a pretty timely data point, right? So, if you're writing a blog about the War of 1812, probably not as important to update it quarterly. But
well, hey, they do say every 3 months. So.
Every 3 months, all right, we'll stick with that.
You might have to have a hot take on that.
Yeah. So I think every 3 months is a good rule of thumb. I mean, you and I talked to a platform, AI content platform in the office 2 days ago, and that was the first thing they said. They said, we have a bunch of really awesome, sexy features we want to show you, but one of the most important things for most brands is this one that just helps automate refreshing content in a basically one-click fashion, because you need to do that every 3 months.
Yeah, and I think that's a really exciting opportunity for everyone in the room to think about, as marketers, we continuously want to reinvent the wheel. We want to come to a client or come to a meeting with a brand new idea and kind of have that wow factor. But thinking about how low-hanging fruit, like content refreshes, can actually generate so much speed and so much impact quickly, and then you can build out all of those fun things. And this actually is a reminder to myself. I have to replay this in my head all the time because I'm always about the big idea or the big ideas that we're all generating, but thinking about focusing on low-hanging fruit, capitalizing on that, and with AI visibility, we have that opportunity, and with AI search, we have that opportunity. Capture that, and then in the background, start building on those other, exciting, fun things like what's our Reddit strategy, what's our social strategy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeremy, I have a very hot question for you.
Bring it.
So everyone's been, well, actually, to set the stage, there's been some drama, both last week and this week, in the ads world around will ChatGPT or has ChatGPT already launched ads? And same thing with Gemini, right? We saw that probably the most exciting thing that's happened in the PPC world over the last couple of years is Adweek publishing an article that stated that Gemini actually released ads, but they did not do that, and then Google had to shut that down. So a lot to unpack there, but talk us through it.
So are ads coming to LLMs, to chatbots, to these AI experiences? The answer is yes. The internet is powered by ads. Yes, subscriptions can be a part of that. But even thinking about Google, like there was a Googler who was there for 17 years trying to get Google to stand up a subscription model of Google that had no ads. And eventually he got fed up and left and tried to start a competing search engine, and it failed. But
that's an easy business to go into.
I know, right? The internet is powered by ads. Ads will be coming to these AI experiences. I think what's going to be fascinating is figuring out what form those ads take. And we're going to have a few more things, like, again, with that ChatGPT thing. They launched a new Android app, and someone looked in the code and found all these things like targeting and bid and ad placement. And they're like, ooh, it's coming. And then Sam Altman declared code red, stopped working on ads. We got to catch up with Google, just like Dan was talking about a minute ago, Gemini, like their new release. But what we got to think about is the form that the ads take. Why did Google win the search engine wars? It's because they invented Quality Score, which made sure that the ad placements, it wasn't just whoever had the deepest pockets, it was whoever wrote the most relevant content so that Google users weren't annoyed by the ads. That's the tightrope that they have to walk, and that's the analogy that I've been using on that is Google and ChatGPT are playing a massive game of Cards Against Humanity. Come with me on this.
We're here for it.
If you've played Cards Against Humanity, I won't ask people to raise their hands. Maybe we'll do apples to apples, right? That one's more friendly.
Well, they can raise their hands about playing, maybe not what the full sentences were.
Or how often.
Yeah.
But the way that those games work is you've got a topic in the middle of the table, and you're sitting there staring at like 5 cards, and you're trying to find something that matches that, but you only have those 5 to pick from. That's what's happening in these AI conversational experiences. Like Adam said, the fastest growing group of queries, 6+ words, very specific things that people are asking. And then you've got Google with their traditional ads. They're sitting there, it's more than 5, but it's still a finite number, looking at them and going, gosh, none of these actually match what they're looking for, so if I place an ad, it's going to feel bad. And so all of them are trying to make sure that when and by all of them, I mean like Google, ChatGPT, et cetera, they're trying to figure out in those AI experiences, how can we empower advertisers to target strategically, but also leave room to make sure the ads are integrated seamlessly and don't feel like a barrier to the answer or something that's really cheesy and sponsored.
Yeah, and that's the whole premise of why these LLMs took off, right? Because they removed that friction. Yeah. First of all, the friction of having to read, right? I feel like I've gotten slightly lazier from that because I'm like, I want my answer here and now, but also the element of bias. And we know that there's probably, we spoke about context and kind of the importance of the truth that or the sources that you're putting into the LLMs, but they really did have a leg up in the beginning of the race, thinking through, okay, we are essentially serving you an unbiased POV, right? Yeah. That's a big one to be up against.
Yeah, a big one to be up against. And if you've got any sponsored element that needs to be clearly declared or clearly segmented or integrated in a way that doesn't feel like it's pulling that bias one direction or another. And that is going to be a very hard balance to get. We saw ChatGPT face some backlash recently when they added a feature called suggested apps. And that was not an ad, but when the ChatGPT users were using it and they saw it for the first time, their knee-jerk reaction was they thought it was an ad. They thought ChatGPT was trying to shove an app in their face that was semi-related to their query, and a lot of angry posts about that. A lot of very angry people.
We won't hold you to this, but I'm personally interested. Do you think that the LLMs like ChatGPT have a hat in the race of building their model on subscriptions, or do you think the ad frontier is coming?
I think it's going to be supported by ads. I mean, even if you start with, we talked earlier this morning about Netflix. Like, even they weren't able to sustain on a purely subscription-based model. And this isn't even like the Netflix of today. This is like when they were getting going and everyone else was jumping into the race and creating competing streaming services. Right now, everyone is clawing for stickiness. It's easy to get someone to try something. What ChatGPT wants to have happen is the user experience just becomes ingrained into your life. So when you, like Google turned into a verb, let me Google that. Like they want to get people feeling the same way about their experience. And so, yeah, I think that's the tricky thing that they have to walk. There will be ads. They can't be just sustained by subscriptions, but that's the balance they're trying to walk.
Yeah, my only qualm is that the branding, the way they're naming these LLMs, it doesn't roll off the tongue as easy as let's Google it.
Yeah.
How many times have you twisted your tongue saying like, let's chat GPT it or GPT it or
Too many
Perplexity
syllables.
it?
Yeah.
It's a tough one, but hopefully they'll up their branding game.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, Adam, do you have anything to add to that part?
I mean, I'm in the same camp as Jeremy. It's a when, not an if for the ads, right? I think like ChatGPT developer found source code on the app for like an ads.txt before they declared the code red. The Gemini story that Google is vehemently, objected to. It was by Adweek and it was multiple anonymous sources saying it. So I think this is a near guarantee. I'd also throw out like, yes, we work at an ad agency. That's not a bad thing. Like ads are great. Ads do power the internet. You say, well, okay, there's some negative externalities to that, 100%, but it would be such a stratified, the internet itself would be a luxury product for the wealthy if it weren't for ads. Like that is what allows these companies to monetize. You mentioned Netflix. They make more money off of an ad-supported user than they do a premium subscriber when you combine the bit of the subscription and the ad revenue. So it's a model that, it's the only model that's shown to work for any of these massive scale consumer companies that reach over 1 billion users. I don't think that's a bad thing. The other reason that Google worked is because the ads themselves were really personalized, right? Before that, if you went on Alta Vista, like search for running shoes, and you'd see a Pepsi ad, right? Not very relevant, but if Pepsi was bidding the most money, that's what you'd see. Google, of course, weighed how much you were willing to pay, but in combination with that quality score, so you saw something relevant. The LLMs can go a whole step beyond that in terms of the relevance, right? Think about, for those of you active users, or think about the examples Dan gave, how much information the LLMs have about you. Those of you who are meeting me in person for the first time, you can see not the easiest to find clothing in my size. I'm 6'7". I once walked into a Banana Republic. First year I dated my now wife, and they said, we don't have clothes for people like you. I got a people like you.
You should be like, I'm in the NBA. What does that mean?
But ChatGPT and Gemini have told, like, I'm 6'7", these are the brands that fit me, these are the brands that don't fit me. This is exactly, like, if they don't have a 36 inseam pant, like, don't show me anything. Yeah. Like, that's even beyond what I'd get from Google in terms of it's not just relevance, it's true personalization.
Yeah. Even filters on a landing page, right? Like on a site.
Correct. So the level of personalization, which has been this buzzword of like personalized content for years and years and years in our industry, it can actually happen. It can actually come to fruition with LLMs. And I think that's what's going to make the ads, potentially, if they take advantage of that, really interesting. Yeah. The last example I'd give, like on the B2B side, you'd be able to get, we all serve ebooks or webinars as gated content. Like LLMs might be able to serve a completely bespoke ebook to every person who comes through, so that if I'm looking for top CRMs for small business in the construction industry, I get an ebook with case studies specific to small construction companies.
Yeah, I'd say you share a similar vision with Dan on websites being eliminated, because that is a really good layup for that.
I actually don't think websites will be eliminated completely. That one, I would.
We have to get a debate going on stage right now.
Yeah. The big hook.
I think a lot of people said the same thing about physical stores with the onset of e-commerce. They've dipped, no doubt about it. I'm not trying to make a case for websites becoming any more important. They will decrease in importance. Retail stores are down something like 28% since 1990. There's still a lot of retail stores, and there's a lot of people who want to go in and have that experience. I think there'll still be people who want a curated experience from an individual brand rather than something filtered to them. But it will definitely be a shift and a decline in importance.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, we'll have to come back to that in a couple of years and see who won that debate. In a similar vein, you spoke about shopping, and I think a big question that comes up is, what does that shopping integration look like in ChatGPT or just any of the LLMs? Really open to both of you guys jumping in, but Shopify has announced an integration. Many others are coming as well. What is that experience, and how is that evolving retail as well?
You want to go into the agentic side of things or come back to that?
Let's come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that the shopping experience in ChatGPT and other LLMs is the tip of the spear for ads opportunities. We saw this play out in Google AI overviews. If someone has a query that is very commerce focused, it's very clear they're looking to buy the thing, then a shopping listing is the easiest ad-like product to include that doesn't feel intrusive. So, based on that, if you are a retailer, let's put the website question aside. Let's talk about your feed. Your shopping feed suddenly becomes incredibly important to have optimized, and make sure that you're feeding that into all the places that those things are seeing that, so that you're served as it's customizing it for Adam. Yeah. It knows what sizes you have available. It knows what's in stock. It knows all these attributes. So when he asks his very specific, very picky question, ChatGPT or Gemini or whoever knows to surface your product that is the good match. You don't just have to count on him finding it. You're actually giving it all the information to answer that question.
Yeah, I think Jeremy nailed it, but I think I've even been talking to JJ about, one of the advantages we will have in terms of differentiators for paid search, but this certainly applies to LLMs as well, is, it's the garbage in, garbage out concept again. Like, feeds are the input, right? Feeds, creative assets, it's a tie-in to the panel we had earlier, that Dan led. All of those are elements where we get to control the quality of what goes into the algorithms, into the LLMs. And so I think that as a broader skill set is just going to become more and more important too, is how do we manipulate the input specific to shopping, the feeds, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to pull the levers we used to. We are going to need to be kind of tastemakers on the inputs.
Yeah, makes sense. So shifting gears a little bit. So we spoke a lot about what it takes to rank on LLMs, what our vision is for the future with them. Ads aren't a thing just yet within the LLMs, which causes us, as maybe some conversion-focused marketers in the room, a little bit of anxiety. Like, what do we measure? Clicks are gone, click-through rates are gone, conversion rates correlated to those clicks are gone. What are we looking for in terms of proxy metrics? Adam?
I think it requires a complete rethinking of measurement. This has been one of the topics we've covered in the most detail with some of our early and curious clients. Jeremy and I and our talented Microsoft team, many of those team members were in New York a few weeks ago, and that was the biggest chunk of the conversation with them. I think there are a few things that are super important to measure. One is your overall share of voice, AI share of voice. What percentage of the time are you showing up? And that's a nice parallel to SEO metrics. What percentage of the time are you showing up on important prompts or queries? come back to a challenge there in a second. I think for whatever reason, a lot of the third-party measurement tools either bury or don't include the overall volume of mentions. So I think you also need to look at not just the percentage of times you rank. At the end of the day, like, I'm ranking 85% of the time on a really small number of prompts. That's not gonna have as much impact on my business if I'm showing up 1 million times, even if that is a small percentage. So I think that overall volume is hugely important. And you need to look at the referral traffic, but it's called zero click for a reason. There's very low click-through rates. We get the answer we're looking for in the response. We don't always need to click on something. But what happens is you get that answer, and if it is a commercially minded search, they tell me that there's actually a brand based out of London called Spoke that carries a lot of pants and 36 inseam. Well, then I'm going to go directly to Spoke's website and order from there. So when you think about, okay, how do we measure that? In a lot of ways, it's the same challenge we face with some of our other upper funnel no-click channels. You know, shout out to that programmatic team, CTV and podcast ads. One of the things, it's not the most scientific right out the gate, but you should look for correlations, right? If you see a huge uptick, and this is why I think the volume of mentions is important. If I see a huge uptick in mentions on ChatGPT and on Gemini, and then I also see an uptick in direct site visits or branded search impressions, I think that's a pretty good indicator that that AI visibility is translating into business impact. I'll wrap up so we can get Jeremy's thoughts on this topic too, but the challenge that I alluded to earlier, I think on the SEO side, when we look at share of voice and some of these metrics, we have very obvious key kind of like tentpole terms that we're looking for. Because on the LLMs, it is these 6+ word queries, it's hard to figure out what that baseline set of keywords is. And I think that's where we as an agency can provide a lot of consultative value to them, is even in determining what to track, right? We had a conversation with Bizzuto a month ago on this topic, and like luxury apartment is bar none, like their most important kind of tentpole term on the non-brand side. You can't track just luxury apartment because no one goes to ChatGPT and says luxury apartment. You might search best apartment Northwest DC with a Peloton bike in the fitness center. You might search, nicest apartments in Southwest DC with modern and clean aesthetic. There's so many different ways to search for luxury apartment where you get to get personalized and specific. So I think that part is still a little bit unknown, but a huge opportunity for us to own what queries or prompts do we actually track.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Before we move on to Jeremy, I wanted to point out also the huge opportunity for us to capture the moment and define the dashboarding and what the measurement piece really looks like. Because to your point, you and I have chatted about this, like the AI visibility scores that we're seeing within SEMrush, SEO Clarity, all of these different platforms is really a score that's determined based on what your competitors are doing. I'm sure for everyone in this room, their clients and the businesses they work on care about what their competitors are doing, but it also doesn't allow you to look at where the puck is going, right? So if you're hyper-focused on just competing, yes, you can use those scores, they're a good proxy, you can lean on them. But if you're also focused on tracking where the puck is going and essentially being above those when you're checking your scores, it's a huge opportunity for us to define what that looks like. So that's something that I'm personally really energized by.
Yeah, and I think one more thing there on the scoring, I do think all of these third-party tools are getting a little lazy in terms of it's just a relative ranking score against
they're building their models in ChatGPT. That must be happening.
Yeah, but it's just how are you performing relative to your competitors? Yeah. Like I'm more focused on just what is driving business for me as a brand. And so one of the, again, really important things that aspirations of creating our own scoring system around is the commercial intent of that search, right? Like going back to the Microsoft example, cloud software is a very big, popular topic, but like someone searching cloud software is not anywhere close to the bottom of the buying funnel and becoming an Azure purchaser. If someone's looking up best data warehouse for startup gaming company, yeah, I'd rather rank, once there than 10 times on cloud software, which is, could be my mom trying to catch up the last 25 years and figure out what that means when I say the phrase.
Jeremy, I'd love to hear your takes on proxy measurement and what you think.
When I was out at Google in May for a feedback council, I asked one of the folks at Google, I was like, so which team has the assignment of figuring out ads in AI overviews and Gemini and all this other stuff? Well, I didn't say Gemini at that time. Maybe I should have pumped them for information. Well, which team has that job? And what he said back was, everybody's got that job. We all got the email saying all ideas are open, everyone feed into it. So to come back to your question and draw a parallel, what are the KPIs for AI, visibility, AI search, all those things? I don't know. But here's what's going to happen. We're going to all figure it out. And it's the job of every person in this room to ideate, to iterate, and to figure out what those KPIs are. We're going to have stuff from third-party tools. That third-party tool stuff, like Adam said, it's pretty lazy, and it's not necessarily measuring with the right yardstick. So we as a group are going to figure out what those KPIs are. We're going to use them to optimize for our clients, and then we're going to lead the industry into defining that. And what's more, we're going to push Google, ChatGPT, others to give us the data we need. Because here's my other prediction. Within the next 4 months, Google's going to add more AI insights into Google Analytics, into Google Ads. We're going to get really excited about it. We're going to open them up. They're not going to be what we're looking for. And then ChatGPT is going to release data, and it's going to be completely different than anything Google wants to give away. We're going to go back to Google and say, hey, you know what? They're giving us this. You should give us this. And we get to play that fun little game.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like we're democratizing search a little bit too, so maybe not a bad thing. Awesome. So, we spoke about now measurement and all of those elements, and we can all agree, and I think everyone in this room can agree that there is an element of discovery that, you have to be present on LLMs, but there is still a pressure on teams to show conversion-focused metrics and still incorporate ads and all of that stuff. How are you both thinking about, that mix when you think about, okay, how much resource should be allocated to those discovery activities versus those conversion-focused activities?
Yeah. I think that this is a big opportunity to recalibrate how we and clients think of search success. 25 years ago, when Google was getting going, and 20 years ago, when I was getting started in my career, every Google meeting, they would come and talk to clients, say, so you should spend money in search, and here's why. For every dollar you put in, we can tell you exactly how many dollars you made. That was their sales pitch. And the problem is, in some ways, they're still stuck in that corner that they painted themselves into. We've seen Google have difficulty pivoting and really owning the mid-funnel, even though they built really good tools, because even their data is still kind of stuck in that corner. So I think there's massive opportunity to own the mid-funnel, and I think it goes back to we're going to have to show that value to our clients. We can't count on them to see it for themselves, and we certainly can't count on Google to tell that story.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd assign a certain kind of percentage or allocation of resources based on where in the funnel it is. I think again, for most of these advertisers, most of our clients, it's starting to think about what to measure in general, how to start ranking more frequently. Like that should be the goal for the next 3 months is can we increase that number of mentions? And then I think if you want to put another quality filter on it, it's on more commercially minded searches. That said, I mean, a lot of the volume is mid to upper funnel. So should you care about ranking on, prompts that have absolutely no commercial viability? No, that would be vanity metrics. But I do think you need to rethink what is a commercially minded opportunity. If someone is querying, I know one of the main use cases for me of ChatGPT, Gemini is planning trips. It's my basically travel agent, especially all the logistics with 2 young kids. If I'm searching best, we'll use an example from nearby, like, can I get around Disney World without renting a car? That doesn't sound like a commercial search. That is absolutely a commercial search for any hotel that is on the monorail at Disney World,
100%.
right? So if I'm a Marriott, much better example, a Hilton.
Thank you for that correction.
Man, that was almost bad. If I am a Hilton on the monorail, like and there are going to be ads on ChatGPT, I absolutely want to, if not show an ad to that person right then, like that is a way that I want to target that person, even though it wasn't in that moment commercially minded. And I think that's one of the differences from Google is Google, we'd always say with paid search ads, you get to show an ad to the relevant person at the point in time when it's relevant. That I think will be a shift. You're not necessarily going to just show ads at the point in time when it's relevant. That's where it would parallel like, Meta or paid social advertising a little bit more. You're going to show ads to people for whom it's relevant to in general. And I think that's how I'd think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality of it is that we are still faced with the challenge of, how do we plan budgets around allocating resources for SEO or AI visibility versus things like paid media. How would you approach that kind of like budget conversation in terms of, how do you allocate that mix correctly?
So allocating budget across SEO and paid for AI visibility. First, everyone who is working on one of those channels needs to have a conversation with the client about how important both of them are and how Brainlabs should be doing both of them together. And once you have that, then you can start talking about, okay, how do we allocate that budget across there?
Yeah, holistic search, I love it. Mm-hmm. Adam, anything to add?
I think this is something we're already thinking about and discussing, but I think there's an open question of, is this elements of SEO and paid search? Is this a separate team? Where does, certainly organic, social, digital PR, how do those fit in as well? So I'm thinking about team building. I don't know, I wouldn't overcommit to anything yet. I would remain flexible as an organization, certainly as an agency. But to Jeremy's initial point, I think it's in part the responsibility of everyone. Holistic search is something we've talked about forever, and it sounds great. It's real now, right? AI Max campaigns are actually somewhat contingent on how effective the SEO and on-site optimizations are, because that's a way that AI Max is deciding who to target and how. And so we're seeing SEO and paid search more connected because of AI than ever before.
Yeah. Okay, we're almost at time. So I do want to ask one final question, and this is more on the topic of emerging things that are coming out right now. So we've heard a lot about this opportunity that may come about in terms of agents actually performing searches on your behalf and potentially even executing an entire purchase or an entire discovery process. I want to hear your thoughts on that, Jeremy.
I think agentic shopping can be huge for certain categories, especially repeatable purchases. Think about the success of Dollar Shave Club and Harry's. They didn't make a better razor. They offered a value prop of you never have to think about buying razors again. They're just going to magically show up. You'll always have them. For those of you that I'm meeting for the first time here, and those of you I've met before, you'll notice I pretty much always wear Converse shoes because I am lazy with my fashion choices. And you'll notice today, these are pretty much toast. So actually, sitting on the plane before we took off, I was like, I need to order some more Converse.
Yellow ones.
So I went to Amazon and I did a search and I got a bunch of ads for shoes that looked like Converse but weren't Converse. And okay, so I went to the Converse website and I did a search on Google of, with my size, and it took me to the Converse website and it showed me all the shoes. And then but they weren't my size. I had to go and redo that filter, and then it was really slow, and then it timed out. So if I could use an agent to just buy me new Converse every 6 months, and here are my 5 favorite colors, and pick one, I'm doing it in a heartbeat. I'm not doing that for all my purchases, but for repeat purchases, I think that's huge, and I think it's going to take off.
Briefly, before I give my response, can we give a hand of applause? Jeremy, I think, has the best hand gestures of any public speaker I've ever seen in my life. It's just an honor to be on stage next to you. There's pointing, there's snapping, there's using your hand as like an easel. It's unbelievable.
I'm always telling people
there's no way I will ever get that good.
I'm always telling people about the fish I caught.
Yeah, I'm bathing in greatness. I'm a little bit more bearish on agentic commerce. I just don't think for the major platforms, on Amazon, for instance, they're not going to let someone else. They will build their own agentic commerce. I should rephrase. I don't think they're going to allow other agents that are not owned and operated by Amazon make purchases because the data is just too valuable for them, right? Like the search data within Amazon is almost as valuable as that small margin they're actually making on the sale itself. And so I do think there's an opportunity for agentic commerce across it's discoverability for like D2C brands, the same way those D2C brands, needed to rely as a percentage of revenue more heavily on digital advertising for discoverability. I don't think for major platforms it's going to be something that, or major companies, they allow third parties to shop on the behalf of the consumer because they want that data and they want that relationship. Tie into one of our other topics, first party data, not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. That was awesome. Thank you so much, both. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.